Today we're talking about discovered checks, and we're looking at this rook right here. Now, in order to create a discovered check, we just need to move the piece that is blocking the rook's mobility, and all we need to do is move that, and it'll create a check. Now, one of the things we want to do is we don't just want to check blindly. Let's say we go here. Okay, black isn't check. Black either has to, well, black can't move the king. Black has to move a piece to block. It could be this piece. It could be this bishop here or this knight here. We don't know which one. We don't want to just move blindly and trade that way. What we'd like to do is get some value out of it. And this is the trickiest part about discovered checks. If you're going to do it, you want to try to do it in a way that allows us to win material. So, again, we have this bishop right here. We're going to move it to pretty much anywhere we want. So let's try going to c4 right there. Again, discovered check. Now, normally c4 would be protected, but now black has to either move the king or protect it. So in this case, black decides to play the knight right there. Okay. Well, black's knight is now pinned to the king, so we can go ahead and we can take this knight and we can capture, because black is probably not going to want to do that exchange right there. So our knight is now safe as long as the king is pinned. Now, of course, let's say black decides to bring out its bishop and put an extra attacker on there to get rid of the knight. Okay. Well, now we can go ahead and we can capture there. And we're essentially forcing black to either recapture here with this or the other piece, and then we can get our bishop out of the way. Now, there's, of course, a trap here. If let's say, black decides to capture with the bishop, now we can go ahead and capture again. Discovered check. Black has to move the king, or it has to block. In this case, it could block with the bishop, and then we can win the queen that way. So the discovered check has a lot of options, and it's very valuable in that it limits what your opponent can do. The plan here is to look at one more whiteboard example before we look at some actual games that were played. Black here wants to try to trade off material and push his pawn forward. So what it's going to try to do is play knight to g4, looking to exchange knights. Now, white could go ahead and take the knight, and that would be the end of the exchange right there. But we need to think of discovered checks on another level, if we can, because they're very valuable in helping us win material. So let's rewind this a little bit here. What else could white do in this situation? Well, white has a discovered check. Okay, so that means they're basically getting a free move with this knight. So what white could do in this situation, instead of just exchanging, which would be the normal thought process here, white could go to, if you said c4, that is correct. Now, black has basically two options, well, more than two options. They can move the king to one of these few squares right here, or they can block. Blocking's not good, because the king is still in check, so that's not a good option. The other option for black is to simply move its king. And if you'll notice right here, white can capture either one of the rooks. Yeah, you can pretty much capture either one of the rooks, and it wins good material right there. All right, now let's take a look at some games. In this game right here, we're playing as white and trying to set up a discovered check to win some material. The idea is that we could take this knight and get a free move where we can capture the queen. So that's the idea here. So the first thing we're going to do is put the queen in position. Now, there's a couple of options. I chose the worst of the two. I chose d2. c1 would have been a better option here. I chose d2. My opponent decided to push the pawn forward. Okay, we go back to C1. Now, the only good thing here is, and this can be a problem when you're going on the offensive. Sometimes you see your attacking moves and you don't see the other moves. So my opponent has just pushed me back and is looking to put pressure on the queen back on C1. All right, I move out of the way. They decide to bring the knight forward to protect that pawn. However, the discovered check is still in place. If you'll notice, our queen has a discovered check. And the cool thing about it is once we move this knight, we basically get a free move. So we can move the knight anywhere, even on protected squares. Doesn't matter. We could go here and, we're going to win the queen. Or we can do what I actually did, which is go knight to d5. Check. Black decides to move its king. And then we go ahead and we capture the queen there. And at that point, after this check, Black decides to resign. In this game right here, we're playing as Black, and we would like to get our queen behind the pawn and eventually get to the point where we could get a discovered check. Okay, but we want to do some other stuff first. We'd like to solidify our position here. We'd like to move White's queen out of the way. We have a queen that can go a number of squares. Notice the queen is defending A7. That means we can move the rook to A7. So we do that. White decides to move its queen out of the way. A number of options. White decides to go with queen to D1, which is really good for us because they don't see that we have a knight in place. We can set a fork in place by going to E3. Okay, White actually comes up with a good move here and misses one little thing. White decides to move its knight, threatening to exchange queens. And we don't want to exchange as Black because we're down material. But this creates an opportunity to get us to the all-important C6 square, which we do. Okay. White decides to move its queen forward to the protected square there, threatening to take the rook, which is no longer protected by the queen. So at this point, I decide to just capture right there with the knight. Okay. Looking to try to set something up here. And White decides to take the rook unguarded on A7. One little problem with that, if you remember, our queen has a discovered check. All that we need to do is move this pawn right here to D4, which we do. There's a check. White only has one option. It takes it. We go ahead and we move the knight back to E3. And now White is in a lot of trouble. White can only move the king to one square. And remember, our knight is protected. White decides to go with moving the rook, to which we play queen to G2. Checkmate. And that's the game right there. In this close game right here, we are playing as Black, and we get a huge opportunity for a discovered check. Our first move is not going to be with the bishop, it's going to be with the rook. And remember, the bishop is protecting that F2 square, so the rook can go there as well. Check. We get very, very lucky. Our opponent has two choices and decides to go with G1. Huge opportunity here. Not just in terms of discovered check, but remember, we want to win material. So what do? We take the rook and we go to D2. Putting the king in check. The king has to move. Or White has to block. Neither option is good. White decides to resign to this point. If White moves to one of these squares, well, they lose the rook. and pretty much the game there. So anyway, white decided to resign there, and there's another good example of a discovered check. On our final example, this is a very powerful discovered check that was set up. I was playing as white, and I'm just going to go over the position real quick before we go through some stuff. We got a queen in position right here, so it's blocking a few squares. We got a couple bishops, and more importantly, we got a couple rooks, which will come into play later on with a discovered check involving rook and bishop. So first thing we're going to do is we're just going to put our bishops together. So I'm going to move the bishop to d2. And we're looking to break apart the position. Black decides, instead of developing its pieces, to move its king somewhat to safety with the idea of developing its pieces later on. I think it had a number of other options there with the king, of course. Okay, the idea is to get these rooks involved. The problem is there's all these pieces in the middle, so we need to clear that out. So the first idea is to push the c-pawn forward right there. They may take, they may not take, I can't remember. I think they ended up not taking and doubling up there. Because remember, we also have the rook on c1 that can recapture there. So, okay, black moves the queen. Fair enough. The next move is to simply take with the pawn right there. And what we're doing is we're looking to open up some stuff for the rook. Black decides to recapture there with the queen, and here is the major opportunity. The first thing we need to do is move these two bishops out of the way. We could pretty much pin the queen to the king here, but it's going to have to come via discovered check because black is a good player and black's going to know this. So first thing I do is move the bishop, looking to threaten the queen. Queen has a number of options. What black decided to do was to play queen to e7. And here's where the major opportunity is. Okay? Obviously, if you look at the d1 rook, if we move this bishop right here on d2, there's a discovered check. Now, we also have the option of a double check. I think that would have actually been checkmate. Oh, wow. I totally missed that move. But, unfortunately, I missed that move. And I went with... I was greedy for material here. So instead of winning the game right there, I did not see that. I was so greedy for material that I went for the queen. Because the discovered check is basically a free move. So I went here. And, yeah, so that's what I did, and ended up winning the queen, and then taking the long route, clearing through material to win the game on this one right here. So chess can be very complicated, I guess is the final point. Can't always catch every move. There's another check there. We're eventually able to get through here and finish off with a mating pattern there. But yeah, I missed a mate in one move. That would have been a double check, a really nice discovered check there. So yeah, but yeah, the point is to keep trying and looking for opportunities for discovered checks and set that up as best you can. And of course, that's going to ramp this up. I am signing out. If one is looking for more tips on chess, I've got links in the description below to 3 different playlists. One is against like the master level AI. Another one involves chess problems such as mate in 2, 3, 4, 5. That's for the pure chess. That's a game for the PS4. You don't have to have the game to look at the problems. I've got 99 different problems in there. Probably maybe 30 or 40 are pretty good depending on skill level. And I've learned a ton from doing those problems there. We also have a chess for beginners playlist with all kinds of tips. This one's going to be in there. But yeah, we got a lot of different cool tips on chess as far as how to get better and find moves and stuff like that. And of course, that's going to wrap this up. I am signing out. Thanks for watching, and good luck.